Bakhmut was not supposed to feel like a place where the dark itself could turn against you. But in this battle, night did not hide movement. It exposed it. What made Bakhmut so disturbing was not only the scale of destruction or the length of the fight. It was the way modern war began to hunt men through ruins, cold streets, and broken buildings that should have offered cover. In a city smashed by months of shelling, even silence became dangerous, because the moment a position was seen, tracked, or sensed, survival could collapse in seconds. This is what makes the story so serious. Bakhmut was not only a brutal urban battle between Ukraine and Wagner. It became a warning about how sniper teams, battlefield awareness, and hidden eyes in the sky were starting to change the meaning of movement, shelter, and control. And once that change began, the cost of every Russian step forward became heavier than it first appeared. Stay with military force, because the real story is not only how Bakhmut was fought, but what this battle revealed about the new shape of war. Bakhmut became the perfect battlefield for Ukraine's thermal sniper tactics, because the city turned every ruin, every street corner, and every broken structure into a place where movement could be watched and punished. This was not a normal fight across open land. It was a long urban battle shaped by smashed apartment blocks, exposed road crossings, narrow lanes, and half-destroyed buildings that gave only weak cover. In that kind of ground, even a short move from one position to another could become deadly. Ukraine understood that very early. That is why it sent in special sniper teams, many from elite units, not only to defend the line, but to make each Wagner push slower, harder, and more costly. Their job was not simply to fire at whoever appeared. Their job was to turn the city itself into pressure. Every delay mattered. Every man lost mattered. And every failed Russian step added weight to the battle in a way that could not be ignored. That is where the real advantage started to come into view. The key tool in that advantage was thermal optics, because in Bakhmut, the fight often continued in darkness, dust, smoke, and winter cold, where ordinary sight was not enough. Thermal scopes changed that. They allowed Ukrainian snipers to detect body heat through the night and across broken urban ground where a human eye might see almost nothing. In winter, this became even more effective because the cold concrete, brick, and metal around the battlefield gave off far less heat than a living person. That meant a soldier trying to hide behind rubble could still stand out as a bright heat source. A fighter moving through a damaged building could still be noticed. Even a quick dash across a ruined street could be enough to give away a position. For Wagner troops, that changed the meaning of darkness. Night was supposed to reduce exposure and help assault groups move closer. Instead, it often made them easier to isolate against a colder background. What looked like concealment from the ground could become visibility through a scope. And once that happened, the city stopped being a shield and started becoming a trap. That is what made the pressure far more serious than it first appeared. Ukraine used this system to attack not only the body of an assault, but the timing and confidence behind it. A sniper team in Bakhmut was not there to collect dramatic shots for effect. It was there to break the rhythm of attack. When Wagner units tried to cross open sections between buildings, pause near intersections, or gather at temporary entry points, they became much easier to track. A single accurate shot could stop movement, force men to go to ground, and delay the rest of the group behind them. That delay mattered because urban assault depends on momentum. Once that momentum is broken, confusion spreads quickly. Men hesitate. Routes become uncertain. Command at small unit level gets weaker. And what should have been a fast push starts turning into a slow and exposed effort under growing pressure. This is why Ukrainian sniper activity mattered far beyond one target at a time. It changed how the battlefield fell to the side, trying to move through it. And that is the point where technology started to shape behavior, not just casualties. What Wagner believed could help it survive in Bakhmut often ended up helping Ukraine hunt more effectively at night. The dark seemed useful. The wreckage seemed protective. The shattered city looked like a place where small assault groups might slip forward without being seen. But thermal optics reversed that logic. Instead of hiding movement, the ruined environment often framed it. Instead of reducing danger, the winter battlefield sharpened the contrast between human heat and dead stone. So Bakhmut became the kind of place where the battlefield itself worked against the attacker. And once that reality was set, the deeper question was no longer only who held the next block, but how Ukraine turned sight, cold, and timing into a weapon that reached much farther than one sniper shot. Thermal scope almost erased the old value of hiding at night, because it changed darkness from protection into exposure. A sniper no longer needed to see a face, a badge, or even a clear outline to know a target was there. Body heat was enough. A man standing still behind rubble, a soldier carrying heavy gear, or a fighter pausing to watch a street could appear as a clear heat source against cold concrete and broken brick. That changed the meaning of movement in Bakhmut after sunset. Night had once helped assault troops get closer without being seen, but thermal optics made that much harder. What looked hidden to the human eye could still stand out through the scope. And in a city smashed by shelling, where walls were broken and cover was often thin, that advantage became even more serious. So the issue was no longer whether Wagner could move in darkness, but whether darkness still worked for them at all. This is where the battlefield started to punish old habits in a very modern way. The biggest tactical shift was that concealment stopped being reliable in the very hours when troops usually trusted it most. A damaged building could block normal sight, but it could not always hide heat. A pile of rubble could hide shape, but not always presence. In winter, this became even more dangerous because the background was colder, and the human body stood out more clearly. That gave Ukrainian sniper teams a powerful edge during long nights of urban combat. They could scan streets, windows, alleyways, and gaps between ruins with much more confidence than units using standard optics alone. Some sources describe Ukrainian snipers engaging targets at several hundred meters in darkness. There are even accounts of very long-range shots, but the real value at Bakhmut was not about setting records. It was about repeating control night after night and making the enemy feel watched every time they tried to move. And once that pressure became routine, even a short crossing could start to feel like a gamble. That is what slowly wore down the value of night assaults. For Wagner troops, this meant the simple act of crossing open ground became far more dangerous than it appeared from their side. A squad moving through an intersection might believe it was protected by darkness and speed. A group slipping between shattered buildings might think broken walls and smoke were enough to cover them. But through thermal optics, each body could still separate from the colder background. That made even small movements easier to track. A pause to regroup could become a risk. A moment spent scanning ahead could give away position. A machine gunner carrying extra weight could become easier to identify. And a local commander trying to direct the push could reveal himself without knowing it. In that kind of fight, the problem was not only that a sniper could fire. The deeper problem was that men never knew when they were already visible. That uncertainty is what weakened confidence before the shot even came. Because once fear enters movement, tempo begins to break. This is where thermal sight started affecting behavior, not just casualties. Wagner's approach tactics lost much of their nighttime value because many of their routes forced them through spaces that thermal optics could exploit. In Bakhmut, those routes often included intersections, exposed yards, half-collapsed entrances, and narrow passages between damaged structures. These were not random spaces. They were the exact points where assault groups had to gather, pass, or slow down. That made them easier to monitor and easier to punish. So even when a strike did not destroy an entire unit, it could still delay the push, scatter men, and force others to wait longer under stress. That is why thermal optics mattered so much in this battle. They did not just help Ukraine see the enemy. They helped Ukraine strip away one of the attacker's oldest battlefield protections and turn the night itself into a trap, which leads directly to how sniper teams and drone eyes began working together as one system. Ukraine's sniper teams became far more dangerous at Bakhmut because they did not fight as lone marksmen, but as small, disciplined systems built around teamwork, timing, and control. Each team usually worked as a pair. One was the shooter, whose task was to fire with precision at the right second. The other was the spotter, who watched the field, measured distance, studied movement, tracked changes, and helped decide which target mattered most. That division of labor made a huge difference in urban combat. It meant one man could stay fully focused on the shot while the other managed the wider picture. In a ruined city where danger could appear from windows, alleys, roof lines, and broken walls, that wider picture was often more valuable than the bullet itself. So the real strength of the pair was not only accuracy, it was battlefield control. And that becomes even clearer once the air above them enters the story. This pairing allowed two soldiers to influence a much larger area than most people imagine. They were not simply waiting for one clean target to appear in front of them. They were reading the ground, studying routes, predicting pauses, and deciding where pressure would matter most. The spotter could notice patterns that a shooter alone might miss, such as repeated movement near a doorway, a group slowing near a damaged wall, or a figure who looked like a local commander rather than a regular assault fighter. That helped the team act with purpose instead of reacting blindly. In Bakhmut, where streets were cut by rubble and every crossing could become a trap, that level of awareness gave Ukraine a serious edge. It also meant these teams could stay effective for longer periods without wasting rounds or revealing themselves too early. And once that ground-level discipline linked up with eyes in the sky, the sniper pair stopped being a pair in the old sense of the word. The real transformation came when sniper teams were connected with reconnaissance drones, because that turned a hidden firing position into part of a wider ISR network. A drone above the city could see movement between buildings, detect men entering basements, follow groups slipping through courtyards, and watch where assault teams paused before pushing again. That information could then be passed to the sniper pair below. Instead of searching a wide urban maze alone, the team could prepare for a target already being tracked from above. This created a continuous chain of observation. The drone found the movement. The sniper team identified the person. The shot came at the moment when escape was hardest. That is what gave Ukraine something close to a no blind spot system in some parts of the city. The battlefield no longer depended on one angle of sight. It was being watched from above and from the ground at the same time, which is why the pressure on Wagner became deeper than a normal sniper threat. This changed the meaning of sniper warfare at Bakhmut because it was no longer just about one concealed rifleman waiting in silence. It became a coordinated hunt built on shared awareness, target selection, and fast action. A building was no longer just a structure. It was a place a drone could scan and a sniper could dominate. A basement entrance was no longer just cover. It was a point where movement could be noticed, confirmed, and punished. That made the system far more flexible than traditional sniping, which often depended on a single line of sight and a narrow moment of opportunity. Here, Ukraine was building layered vision into the fight. And once layered vision enters urban war, the side moving forward starts losing more than men. It starts losing freedom, confidence, and rhythm, which is exactly why Wagner's method of attack became easier to break over time. Wagner's way of attacking often created the exact kind of targets that Ukrainian snipers and drones were built to punish. The group usually pushed forward in repeated infantry waves, often using small assault teams to move from one ruined building to another, test weak points, and keep pressure on Ukrainian positions. That method gave Wagner flexibility, and it also showed a willingness to accept heavy losses if the line could be worn down over time. But in Bakhmut, that same approach carried a serious weakness. Small groups still had to cross exposed ground. They still had to bunch up near entrances, intersections, shattered courtyards, and narrow points between blocks. And once those places were watched from above and covered from the ground, each movement became easier to predict. So the problem was not just that Wagner kept attacking. The deeper problem was that its pattern of attack often led men into the same kinds of spaces again and again. That is where Ukraine found a way to turn repetition into damage. What made these assault routes so dangerous was the simple fact that they were not chosen freely. In urban war, units do not move wherever they want. They move where walls allow, where rubble can be climbed, where gaps exist between buildings, and where a street, doorway, stairwell, or yard gives at least some chance of getting forward. That meant many Wagner teams were funneled into predictable lines of movement. Once a route like that was identified, Ukrainian forces did not need to dominate every meter of the city. They only needed to control the points the enemy had little choice but to use. A drone could watch an approach. A sniper could wait over a crossing. Thermal optics could cover the hours of darkness. Then one small area could start causing delays far beyond its size. That is how a city battle becomes more about pressure than simple distance. And in Bakhmut, pressure kept building where movement narrowed. Some of the clearest examples came from the most contested parts of the city, especially near central access routes and the approaches around the Bakhmutka River. British reporting described parts of that area as a kind of killing zone, where Ukrainian sniper fire from well-prepared positions made exposed ground extremely dangerous for Russian advances. That label matters because it shows the battlefield was not deadly everywhere in the same way. It was deadly in specific corridors where movement became visible, slowed down, and came under layered observation. That is also why even a short crossing could carry outsized risk. A few seconds in the open might be enough for a drone to confirm movement, for a sniper team to stay ready, or for a planned push to lose shape before it fully formed. So the real issue was not only how many men Wagner sent forward, it was how often they had to pass through the same kind of exposed ground under conditions Ukraine had already prepared to exploit. Once that cycle repeated, the cost rose day after day. This had a wider effect on the pace of battle because Wagner was not moving only assault teams through those routes. It also had to move ammunition, evacuate wounded men, rotate personnel, and bring in fresh groups to keep pressure alive. If the same terrain was dangerous for an attack, it was also dangerous for the support system behind that attack. That meant losses could spread beyond the first wave. A route under observation could slow reinforcements. A dangerous crossing could delay supplies. A damaged team could become harder to recover. And when that keeps happening, momentum starts to fade even before the larger battle map changes. This is the key point. Ukraine did not need to seal the whole city at once. It only had to dominate the places Wagner was forced to touch, and that is why every assault became more expensive over time, setting up the larger question of how those losses slowly damaged the quality of Russian combat power itself. Ukraine's snipers did more than kill Russian soldiers at Bakhmut. They slowly damaged Wagner's fighting quality over time. That is the real point of this phase of the battle. These teams were not firing at random men just because a target appeared. They were looking for the people who held a unit together under pressure. That often meant squad leaders, machine gunners, coordinators, or the man giving signals during an assault. When one of those men was removed, the loss went beyond one body on the ground. It weakened control, reduced fire discipline, and made the rest of the group less effective in the middle of chaos. In urban combat, where seconds matter and routes can collapse fast, that kind of damage spreads quickly. And once one accurate shot starts changing the behavior of the whole group, sniper warfare becomes much larger than a simple casualty count. The deeper effect came from repetition, because the same kind of loss kept happening again and again during a battle that lasted for months. If one assault group lost a leader, the next push often had to rely on someone with less experience, weaker local knowledge, or less confidence under fire. If a machine gunner was hit, the team lost part of its suppressive power at the moment it needed to move. If a man guiding the assault was removed, the unit could hesitate at a doorway, bunch up near cover, or lose direction in a ruined block where every wrong turn carried danger. That is how quality starts to fall. Not all at once, but step by step. Fresh men could replace dead men, but replacing skill, timing, and trust inside a small assault unit was much harder. That is why the battlefield cost was growing in a way that numbers alone could not fully show. Ukraine also made this harder to stop because its sniper teams rarely stayed in one place after firing. After pulling the trigger, the team could change floor, switch rooms, move through a damaged hallway, or leave the building entirely before Russian forces could react well enough. That made counter-sniper work far more difficult. Russian units were not hunting a fixed nest. They were chasing a target that appeared, struck, and vanished into a broken city. In a place like Bakhmut, where ruins created many firing angles and escape paths, that mobility mattered almost as much as aim. Russia did capture Bakhmut in May 2023, but the battle lasted around 9 months and came at a huge price. Some estimates put Russian losses in the campaign at more than 30,000 casualties, and Wagner itself later weakened sharply as an organized fighting force. So the main effect of Ukraine's sniper and drone activity was not that it saved the city forever. It was that it slowed the advance, stretched the battle, raised the cost, and turned Russia's eventual victory into a deeply expensive one. Bakhmut left behind more than the image of a city destroyed after 9 months of fighting. It also showed how modern war is changing at a very small level, but with very large battlefield effects. With sniper pairs, thermal optics, and reconnaissance drones, Ukraine showed that a smaller force can still slow a stronger attacker if it controls sight, timing, and movement. This was not only about accurate shooting. It was about breaking assault rhythm, raising battlefield stress, and forcing Wagner to pay more for every step forward. Russia may have captured Bakhmut in the end, but the cost of that victory showed something important. In urban war today, the side that controls information and pressure can turn even a ruined city into a long and painful trap. And that lesson will matter far beyond Bakhmut. Subscribe to Military Force for more clear and in-depth reporting on weapons, battlefields, and the political forces shaping modern war.